Welcome to the I Will Aim podcast. Our topic for today, from mental hellness to mental wellness. And my guest is David Woods Bartley. He has his fair share of success and setback, from directing a nationally recognized nonprofit to battle the long-term effect of childhood sexual trauma and a life-threatening mental illness. The latter is a brutal knockdown. Drag-out fight with clinical depression led David to a suicide attempt. Thanks to the support of many people and being shown the necessity of putting one's self-care on a pedestal, David continues the essential yet challenging journey from the isolation of mental illness to the inclusive space of mental wellness. His life having been saved, David is committed to moving the conversation from suicide, male sexual trauma, and mental illness from the dark shadow where they now live in the front of public concern. In doing so, his mission is to shine a bright light on the crisis we now face and open door to the possibility of mental health for everyone, everywhere. Currently, David is a member of the National Alliance of Mental Illness, the International Association Youth Mental Health, and the National Storytelling Network, Healing Story Alliance. In addition, David holds a certificate in mental health first aid for adult and youth, Safe Talk, which is suicide prevention technique known as QPR, question, persuade, and refer. In addition to giving two TED Talk, being named a 2021 mental health champion by the prestigious Steinberg Institute, and being recognized as the global thought leader, David has presented more than 800 times to audience across the United States, Canada, Central America, Germany, Italy, Japan, Korea, and India, giving in-person and virtual presentation on the subject of suicide, resiliency, male sexual trauma, mental health, and organizational culture, and not last but not the least, servant leadership. Welcome, David.
Will, thank you so much for having me here today. I've been looking forward to this it took a long time for this to come. So I'm very
I'm
excited
glad
that
to
it's
have you
finally
today. I think
here.
this is a very important topic. I think it's something that a lot of people need to hear, and you're the perfect person to do that. Let's start with the first question. Can you share a bit about your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So Will, I grew up on the East Coast where you are, grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland, and am the youngest of four boys. And my beloved father, James Hamilton Bartley, everybody knew him as Ham, suffered terribly tragically, really, from debilitating clinical depression. And unfortunately, Will, he died at just 41 years old of lung cancer. But certainly what I know now of depression, I know depression played a part in that. And so I mention that because I inherited those genetics for sure. And then unfortunately, as a 12-year-old, I was a brand new member of a Boy Scout troop, and I was sadistically and tragically raped on multiple occasions by a Boy Scout leader. And I remember very clearly that every time that this monster did those things to me, he told me, he said, David, don't forget, these are initiations, and all the boys go through it, but we never talk about it. And I say those two things together, and it's hard. And if they're triggering, I apologize. But those two things, the genetics and the trauma, came together and planted the seeds in me as a 12-year-old. And I'm 61 years old now. And I realize now that it was at 12 years old was the beginning of my experience of depression, Will, and certainly my beginning of the experience of being plagued by suicidal thinking. But from the outside looking in, you would have never known that. From all intensive purposes, it looked like I had a very normal childhood. My mom remarried. My stepfather was a wonderful man, and I had stepbrothers and stepsisters, and went through the various levels of school and to college, and ultimately in the late 80s made my way to California, where my two middle brothers lived, and settled here. And probably the most interesting thing in that part of my life before the suicide attempt was I was married to a fantastic, really truly amazing woman. who is still a dear friend of mine, thankfully. And we ran a large animal sanctuary. And if you're an animal lover, Will, and for those who are listening who are animal lovers, you would have loved the sanctuary. Sanctuary was called A Chance for Bliss. And it was home to as many as 100 animals at any one time, 25 horses, 23 dogs,
Wow.
all of whom lived in the house. 9 potbelly pigs, 9 potbelly pigs, goats and sheep and ducks and geese and bunnies and birds and turtles and fish and this whole plethora. And we primarily, thanks to my former wife's big, incredible mama bear heart, we were primarily end of life. So we did no adoptions. And so animals came until they, as we like to say, made their transition. And on June 2nd, 2010, we were the cover story in the life section of USA Today. And yet 14 months later, August 31st, 2011, there I was on a dark spot on a tall, tall bridge, the Forest Hill Bridge, 2 hours west of the famous Golden Gate Bridge and 500 feet further off the ground at 730 feet. There I was on a dark spot on a tall, tall bridge, one slight adjustment of my body away from killing myself. And you would have never known it. And what I tell people, what I implore to people in this issue around male suicidal, the suicide crisis is sometimes what hurts the most can't be seen. And thankfully, though, I was saved. I was saved by a first responder who didn't make contact with me. He made connection with me. And my theory, what I share in my talks, is that connection creates hope. And hope indeed saves lives. So I was taken off the bridge to an emergency room and then 15 days in a psychiatric facility, which is exactly where I needed to be. And my life changed dramatically and began, as you shared, this journey, which has been 13 years now, away from mental hellness and into the space of mental wellness.
Thank you for sharing your story. I think it's tragic, but it also you're able to pivot it to where it needs to be, and I'm really looking forward to unpack the topic so a lot of people could hear more about it. Before we move on, every episode I do dedicate it to a few people. This episode I'll dedicate to one of my mentee, Sarah Abichandani. She's actually the new president of the Toastmaster Club that I used to be part of. She rose from the rank as one of the members and slowly gained her confidence and became a leader of the club. So I'm really looking forward to her to be the president of the club this coming year and Toastmaster year. So who do you want to do the shout out for this episode?
You know, thank you, Will, so much. And I'm going to do it to my beloved fiance, Summer. And Summer and I've been together for 20 years. And I'll have to tell you, it was she who asked me to marry her. So the engagement was very atypical. And I still battle this thing called depression. And I have recently gone through a very difficult time, and it was my beloved who Will was right there with me. So I would love to dedicate this session, this beautiful
Thank you for
experience with you
dedicating to
here
Summer. She's amazing. She seemed to be an amazing person, and I think looking forward to hear more about the topic. Let me go to the first question. What are some of the common misconceptions people had about individuals who thought about committing suicide?
The first one is the common misconception, Will, is that it's a spontaneous thought. It is almost never a spontaneous thought. It is almost always, the vast, vast, vast majority of the time, it is somebody like me has dwelled on this thought innumerable times. And I have probably, at 61 years old, I have probably thought about killing myself 10,000 times, maybe more. That's probably the most common misconception. And the other misconception that comes up, and this one is even, I think, more difficult to understand, but let me do my best to explain it. It's that people who are suicidal really don't want to die. What we want is for our pain to end. And it is most often truly a pain of the mind, of the soul, and of your entire being. Because to give you an example of it, the great chef David Chang has his own battle with bipolar, and he has this quote that gives you a really great insight into what it's like to live when you're depressed. And what he says, Will, is when you're depressed, you're convinced that everything you think is true. And for somebody like me, in that place of being suicidal, what we're thinking is we're stupid, we're ugly, we're pitiful, we're grotesque, we have no redeeming value, and everybody will be better off without us. All of those things, we believe those to be true, not because we're stupid, not because we're out of our mind. It's because that's what this illness, and it is an illness of the totality of who you are. You believe it to be true. So I think those misconceptions that people think we have a death wish, it's not about wanting to die. It's about wanting our pain to end. And people think, gosh, you must have just thought about it. No, it's a long-term malady that we hold. Those two probably are the
I think
most
thank you for
common
shedding the light on that one,
misconceptions.
because I also thought that it was instantaneous thing, right? I think, and I'm being naive, right? And I thought that was what I thought to for the longest time. And thank you for shedding the light that that's not the case. And it's also the pain part, right? Like I think that's the other part that's important for the audience to hear, that those two misconceptions are important to learn from. In your experience, what are most effective strategy or practice that someone could do to help someone who is, thinking about committing suicide? If you have, how do you recognize it?
So I'm gonna flip the question.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm gonna do the second part first. Just to say, one, it's incredibly hard because we are really good at hiding what would be the more recognizable signs, maybe crying or whatever those would be. When you see somebody in an altered state, emotionally, physically, by way of action or anything else, then it's easier
Mhm.
to think, oh wow, well, something's going on. But we're really good at hiding all of that. We are really good at just acting like everything's okay. So in part, I think what I would advise is for us to lean on and to acknowledge that
Mm.
gut feeling. My mom used to talk about this all the time. She used to say, that feeling in your gut. And I think we all have it. And I think it is that gut feeling, Will, that I would like people to pay more attention to when they see somebody who looks like everything's fine. That maybe you may start the conversation as, you know what? I could be totally off base, but I just have this feeling like like you might be suffering from something. Could you please tell me, how are you doing? Begin that way. Because the truth of the matter is, it's this untold story of our suffering that it becomes systemic because we don't talk about it. And there's another quote. I'm gonna bore you with quotes because I love quotations. There's this incredible quote, Will, that says, "To not have your suffering recognized is an almost unspeakable form of violence." And you think, so the people, there's so many, and you talked about this at the beginning, so many people, men, women, children, young, old, are carrying around all of this suffering that they've never talked about. And we're really good at hiding, and yet it is literally slowly killing us. It is because it's killing us because it's convincing us of all those lies. Remember, when you're depressed, you're convinced that everything you think is true. So don't necessarily rely on the signs. What I would like you to do is to please follow your gut, to use the words of my beloved mother, Suzanne, and then ask somebody not a closed-ended question, but an open-ended question. And it could be, again, it could be just say, hey, I may be totally wrong. and I just have this feeling.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're taking responsibility. I just have this feeling. Would you please share with me, like, hey, what's going on? And then listen. It's not about advice. It's about listening. Because here's the impact of listening. When that person, and if you do this, there's going to be a time that you nail this right at the perfect time, and that person is going to share something that is so, and the fact that they've shared is going to be so extraordinarily helpful for them. It's beyond word. And all our job is just to listen. And there's a quote that says, our listening creates a sanctuary in the homeless parts
It's like being seen and
of other
heard,
people.
right? It's like the pain of not being seen and
Exactly.
heard. And I thank you for
Exactly.
really stressing the fact that
Yes.
you put the accountability on yourself, using your gut feel to ask an open-ended question, because I think truly that's really instrumental, right?
Yeah. I just think that, and I don't know. I just think,
And I
I
think
think
that
it's the best
when you
way.
mention about uh, asking that question, and the next part, I think you and I just want to reiterate it because it's quite important. You mentioned about it's not about advising; it's about listening. It's about
Yes.
active listening, listening to understand, but not listening to response. Because human nature is very common tendency for us to like want to give advice, and a perfect example is I'm a
Mm-hmm.
software developer. I every time you give a software developer and a software engineer a problem, they solve it, right? They have 1,000 answers for every question. In fact, I remember early on in my marriage, my wife
Right.
would tell me her problem. I start giving her solution. And she's like, I want you to listen to me. I didn't want you to solve the problem. I want you to listen to me. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't know that. I thought everything you tell me is a problem I need to solve. I think, not to digress, but it was a bit similar to that one where you need to really listen, active
Right.
listening to understand and not respond.
Right.
Thank you for sharing that strategy that could help someone open up on with you. How about if you, as a friend or family member, how could you best support someone who's going through something? Like, how do we best support? Like, what do you other than if you have that conversation, right?
No, I think, well, so one, I think the conversations are great, but you know what? So I'll tell you, and this is what my family has done, and they continue to do this. So when I was um, taken off the bridge into an emergency room and then to a psych ward, I was there for 15 days. You know how many days
Every
my
day.
family came to visit me? 15. 15. It was incredible. And and I remember, I'm in a psych ward. I'm in a loony bin. I'm in, and I have to tell you, my experience there was phenomenal. The staff was incredible. I remember my roommate. His name was Daniel. We couldn't have been, from the outside looking in. Daniel was homeless, and this, and here's me running a nationally recognized animal sanctuary. Yet, you know what? Both of us are in the psych ward, and it was incredible with how well connected we became. So I think for people who are looking to support family members, one thing that my family has done is they have driven me to and
Mm.
from appointments. And it's been, and I'll share something that's happened recently. So at the end of this past year, I fell back into a trough of depression, the likes of which I had not maybe ever experienced. And it made no sense, Will, because I was taking my meds and going to my therapy appointments. I was doing everything that I was supposed to do. And I don't know, life just. And so, at the advice of a very, very dear friend who's a psychiatrist, my family and I got me into what's called ECT. So ECT is electroconvulsive therapy. So, or most people know it as shock therapy. Most people know, they watched One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and they saw people who were became zombies. And well, it's nothing like that at all. And so in the last 6 months, I've had 31 sessions, and it has changed my life. It is, as I like to say, ECT kicked depression's ass. It just, it
Thank you.
saved me. It did. And my family drove me to and from. And they were with, and then my kids. So I've never had children, but Summer, my beloved,
They're
has
your
children. So
children.
now they're the 3-year part of my life. And my kids will ask, and this to your question, they'll ask me, they'll say, well, how are these ECT appointments? What's this therapy like? Because ECT, you go in, they put electrodes around your head, they anesthetize you fully, and then they will put an electrical current into your brain to cause a short seizure. And it is the seizure, cumulatively, that creates a different environment in a patient's brain. And for somebody like me, who was in a very severe place of depression, totally changed it. It's extraordinary. The efficacy of ECT is incredible, but there's so much misconception around it because people think, oh my gosh, it's like one flew over a cuckoo's nest. But and I'll put a period on this and stop talking. It's my family at the psych ward, and now most recently with ECT, what they've done for me, and what I would advise, or what I would not advise but suggest, just go journey with them to and from appointments. It makes the enormous
Being there for
difference.
them.
It's incredible.
Being there.
Yeah, it is.
I think as you mentioned that multiple times, it goes back to the first point that you mentioned before. It's about that connection, right?
It is. And then if I may, and this is because I give her credit, and I hope one day maybe I'll get to meet her. It's the great Brene Brown, and this is connection. And here's what she says: I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and they derive strength and sustenance from the relationship.
Amazing.
Bingo. My time with you has been, when I first had a chance to meet with you, you have created the space where I feel seen, heard, and valued. I feel connected with you. It's not about, I'm not in contact with Will, I'm in connection with Will. And I think for me, and what I like to tell people in terms of, I think the most powerful thing we can do to prevent suicide is to create connection wherever we go, because in the space of feeling seen, heard, and valued, how can you not feel hopeful? And I think it all comes, hope is the weapon.
Yep.
Hope's the ammo.
That is the light of the candle. That is the light of the candle. Thank you.
Yeah, amen. That's the munition. You know what? It's people. I don't think people. I can't imagine a situation when someone who is actively suicidal would kill themselves when they feel hopeful.
Thank you for stressing on that point.
I don't.
Let me ask you the next question. How can either the person going through it or the family member noticing or seeing something, are there any resources or anyone they could reach out to for help, right? Or anyone they could reach out to for guidance and things like that? Because it's hard to be in a place where you felt also alone, right? If you have a loved ones who are going through that and they're not opening up to you, and you want to help them, like that conversation, sometimes resources, it's probably hard for you to to have a conversation with them, but it's probably easier for you to talk to someone else who could give you some guidance on here's how you could approach, or you might approach it. Any resources that you could share?
You know what? And I don't have any specific per se. However, there will be what I have noticed in the last 13 years is how many different support groups have sprung forth, many of them virtually. And I think it's accelerated in the last couple of years in particular, where if let's say you have a loved one who is clinically depressed, and let's say they're suicidal, and let's say that they, no matter what you've done, you've not been able to engage them in a conversation. You've tried this, and that. If you were to Google support group for clinically for spouse of clinically depressed partner,
Okay.
there's going to be a group that comes up. It'll literally be that specific, that there will be people. And if people want to get in touch with me at
Yes,
the
I'll
end, I'll
add.
give my contact information. I'm happy to, yeah, and I'm happy to direct people to some amazing resources that have come into my life. That so you do not need to, especially if in this question, the way I'm interpreting it, it's on the family person. It's hard. I mean, if I had Summer come and sit down here and talk with, which she would, these last 6 months, as I've gone through ECT treatments, and things are so much better now. But January, February, March, I tell you what, it was I mean, I was in a, what I would say to her, and I don't have a memory of this, it was that bad, but Summer has told me every day, Will, I would wake up and beg her to let me die that day. So that's hard. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about
yeah,
just
yeah,
for
yeah.
me. I'm talking
Yeah,
about for,
yeah.
for the person who is supporting you, and you're just like, now, and because I'm so blessed, my family in particular, I have 3 brothers in particular, my eldest brother has stepped forward. He's always been an incredible presence in my life. Like, he took it to a whole nother level. And he and Summer have been the partner together to have helped me in these last 6 months. It's just been,
I think your story and your presence in
yeah.
this episode is truly a gift, right? I think I want to thank you for that. I think I can't say enough. Thank you
Oh,
very
thank
much
you.
for being my guest today. I think we talk a lot about the topic of how we could help people and what are the symptoms and signs. If we have 3 takeaway for this episode, what are those 3 takeaway? And if you have any message for anyone that's going either through that period of darkness, or people supporting them, any message that you could share, that would also be very helpful.
Yeah. I'm so I'm gonna start with the last part for my brother or sister who's out there listening and suffering. So the first thing I'd say is, dear God, I am so sorry. And things can be different. In this most recent experience with this most recent fight, this round with depression, it was more extreme than I've ever experienced. I didn't think I could ever come out of it. And there are resources, there are therapies, there are people that things can be far different than you can imagine they are right now. So I would just say, day at a time, step at a time. It's not your fault. I swear to you, things can be different. And for the caretakers, thank you. I think a lot of attention is focused on those of us who are suffering, but the caretakers don't get near enough acknowledgement. You don't get the praise and the thanks. And I'm not here without Summer. I'm not here without my big brother John. I'm not here without my psychiatrist and Dr. Marasa, who does the ECT. And so thank you for all you do in the background. And I think if we look at in the complexity and the enormity of this thing called suicide, and the fact that it's hiding in plain sight, and all the other factors that make this maybe the single most difficult illness and maybe societal issue that we're facing because of a devastation. I want to quote an amazing man. His name is Dr. Drew Ramsey, and he's a psychiatrist, and he's also an associate clinical professor at Columbia, and so he's the dude. Okay, like he's what he says has merit. It has value. We don't. It's he's the expert. So please consider this not just today, but every single day for the rest of our collective lives. And here's what Dr. Ramsey says. Someone you see today is thinking about killing themselves. Your smile, your question, your love could save them. Trust me, they told me it did. So you think about what we're holding in our hand. That's all I ask you to do. And Will, thank you. Thank you for giving me this space to share my story. And you could have so many people on, and you chose me. So
You're
thank
welcome,
you
David.
so
Really
much.
appreciate your time. I think before we close, I want to give you the opportunity to share your work. Any public speaking engagement you have. How might my audience reach out to you?
Yeah.
I'll post your information on the episode when I release it, and I just want to give you the opportunity to just share
Thank
your
you.
work and how people reach out to you.
No, but thank you so much. So what I do for a living is I share my story. Is I go around and I offer what I like to say is I help people understand, no matter where in a business, a place of faith, a school of any
Yes.
age, because this thing impacts everybody. So I help people better understand mental illness, help them create pathways to mental health, and make suicide prevention doable by reminding them the simple ways that they can do. And so if you are listening to this and would like me to come to your organization or any place of faith or school or college or whatever, please, I would love to. And so my base talk is what I call the why of suicide and the how of hope. And it is very different. And it is story after story after story. And most of the stories that I share are animal stories. So that may be the reason that you have me come. And so it's, you can Google my name and Will have the information. It's David Woods Bartley. You can email me, David at davidwoodsbartley.com. You can call me at 916-247-6389. And then I have a social media platform on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn that is to come. And then there are 2 TED Talks they're a lot of fun. The one at the end is a story about a horse, and the other in the middle is a story about a dog. So
Thank you, David, for your
they're a
time
lot of fun.
today. Your gift to my audience. I think a lot of people could benefit from the discussion. And thank you for the work that you're doing. I think you're changing a lot of people's life. You're giving people's hope, and you're teaching people how to connect. I think those are all immensely important uh, for people to know and learn. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you, and have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Will. It's been awesome.